Hey, Next Economy Now listeners. We're excited to announce that registration for our fall cohort of the Next Economy MBA is officially open. Beginning September 30th, 2025, this 9-month facilitated learning journey was created for listeners like you, the entrepreneurs, artists, community leaders, and other folks on the front lines of the Next Economy movement. Based on our 15 years of experience working with over 500 different social enterprises, we'll explore the pitfalls of the business-as-usual economy and dive into key business principles from a regenerative and equity-centered lens, all while fostering the community and connection we need to stay resilient, inspired, and motivated in our movement to create a world that works for all of us. Interested in learning more? Join us for a free intro session where you can meet course facilitators and hear from alumni to determine if the program's a fit for you. Plus, you can save 20% on tuition when you register before August 11th during our early bird sale. Get started at lifteconomy.com/MBA. Thanks for listening. And now, onto the show.
Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy.
Yay! I'm so excited. I'm Phoenix Soleil, and I'm a partner at Lift Economy, partner co-owner. And my guest today is Simon Mont. And Simon is a student of the mystery, doing his best to express love in the public. His work is to help us shed the skin of broken systems to embody new ways of being, leading, and working together. That's so Next Economy. For the past 10 years, he's been coaching, consulting, and facilitating people and organizations that are moving beyond extractive dominance-based structures into generative, collaborative ones through his work with Harmonize. He's worked with everyone from the off-the-grid permaculture communities to the abortion funds to radical BIPOC healing collectives and wealth management firms. He has been facilitating conversations and group processes for more than 15 years and has supported and trained more than 100 visionary organizations. He is grounded in Jewish liberation mysticism and collective justice movements. In the past, he's been marching band director, public defender, immersive art producer, restorative justice facilitator in prisons, transactional lawyer, and community organizer. He is the co-founder of the nonprofit Democracy Network with the Sustainable Economies Law Center. Welcome, Simon! Yeah, comrade, fellow. Yeah, let's get this world. I mean, as Liffy says, like a world that benefits all life. So glad to have you here. And we got a little bit about your background, but I want to hear, what's your passion right now?
I mean, what's getting me up in the morning right now? This morning was like anxiety.
Okay.
Yeah, the feeling underneath the anxiety, I think that I feel a great sense of calling at this time and a great sense of potential. It feels like something is crumbling and something else is being reborn, and there's an opportunity to kind of show up to support the creation of something new and beautiful, and there's no time other than right now to go all in.
Yeah. At Lyft, one of our philosophies is that there's the pioneer arc, the people who are making the change, and then there are the people who are hospicing the old ways, and we need both. I see you as one of the people who is trying to create the new wave. Like, what are the new systems that we can live into? And one of the reasons I'm excited to have you is because you're doing similar to the work I do, which is like, we have actually some impressive models out there of solutions, but then how do you deal with the systems of human and how we get along with each other? Like, I mean, I tell people, like, I got into this work because I was so demoralized, depressed about some of the communities that were trying to make change because we couldn't get along with each other. If we can't get along with each other, how are we going to change the world, right? I'm curious, how would that lands for you? Yeah.
I agree with you that in some ways, the solutions are not only obvious, but they're already here. I think at a large scale, like what we all know needs to be true is pretty similar to one another, right? We know that there needs to be nourishing food that is accessible for everyone, that is created in a way that is in a regenerative relationship with the earth that allows there to be nourishing food for this generation and for future generations. We know that. We know that we need to be in relationship to energy systems and the natural energy of the world in a way that is regenerative with the earth, that we're not taking too much, and that we're kind of in deep harmony with the natural rhythms that allows us to provide for our own needs and to be able to tend to the non-human and more than human inhabitants and to our future generations, right? We know that we need to create systems of care that uplift and recognize the dignity of each person and that provide dignity and livelihoods to the people receiving care and the people giving care. We know we need education systems that foster liberty and justice and creativity and passion and curiosity, that teach us how to be whole selves as opposed to cogs in an extractive capitalist machine. We are all very well aware of this. And we also can point to a bunch of places that have done it. We can point to solutions around energy. We can point to solutions about education. And when we all dream about it in our mind's eye, many of us see the same thing. The puzzle then is, how do you bridge this gap between our values, our vision, and what we actually create? Our actual impact on the world. And that's what Harmonize was created to do, is to learn how to bridge that gap between the values, the vision, and the impact. And I agree with you that it's like a very gutturally human and humbling inquiry that we all face every day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's one of the things that keeps me up in the night and also what helps power my work. And I'm curious if you can lead our audience through some of what the challenges you've decided to make your piece of this work, you've decided to focus on, and what are the successes? I think people are burning to hear about successes. And that's part of why I'm so excited to do this, is because some of this stuff doesn't get on the news. The revolution has not been televised, but we try our best at Next Economy, Next Economy podcast. Yeah.
So I heard two questions in there. One is like, what's the bit that we've started to work on? And then one is kind of examples of times that it's gone well. I'll start with, there's two layers of this puzzle that we've started to make our own. Each of those layers contains a million layers. But the first layer is just like really straightforward. It's, how do you get a group of people to work together to create a team that can sustain its impact to create the world that we are talking about? You get a group of people together. How do you organize yourselves to make it happen? What are the different ways of understanding that project, of team building or organization building, that allow us to do the thing, right?
And I want to interject, because one of the things that we share, that's our underlying assumption, is that it's not just about getting a bunch of good people in the room. Because I think that's sometimes where people think, if I get a bunch of good people in a room, that's all that matters, because we'll be able to handle conflict. We'll be values aligned. We'll always be able to understand, because we have the same vision. And I see the way you're nodding. So take it from there. Yeah.
The question of how do we be together in groups and share a purpose, and how do we organize ourselves, is a perennial question that all of humanity has faced for as long as we are aware that there has been a humanity. How do we be here, and how do we be here together? It's not like the answer is obvious, right? People have been experimenting for a long time. And one of the things that I've really seen in our movements is we have a massive skill gap. We've invested a lot in creating vision, big picture vision. We've invested a lot in understanding the analysis of the systems that need to change. We've even invested a lot in developing individual leadership capacities. Some of us have invested a lot in healing and overcoming trauma to be able to be in different ways. But we actually haven't recognized that there's a particular technical competency that we need, which is the ability to build a functional organization. It's one thing to have a vision. It's an entirely different thing to be able to coordinate people's labor and beings to pursue that vision together. And to expect everyone to just come out having that capacity doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense that the visionary that can understand the specifics of the solar energy system that we need to build and is the same person who understands the governance structure that we need and is the same person who understands how to do accountability and task management and is the same person who understands how to create like a strong supervision policy. It's just not, it doesn't make sense that we would expect a leader to be able to do that. So that's one of the big gaps that Harmonize really steps into. And we say, look, building an organization is an area of competency that we all need. We need to have some people who are really, really, really good at it. And we need as many people as we can to understand it enough to be able to participate in life-giving ways. Because most of us learned how to be a member of an organization inside of the frameworks that we're trying to transcend. We learned how to be a member of an organization into a school system that was teaching us how to be a way we didn't want to be, right? We learned how to be a member of an organization in a corporate structure. So now all of our ingrained patterns are a mismatch for the world we're trying to create. So this is the puzzle that we have.
Yeah, I love that. That's one of the things is that you don't learn how to share power when you're in school. I mean, it's very top down. You've learned sometimes to obey. I mean, I had one body worker says you learn to get the wiggle out of the child. And then in order to heal, you need that wiggle back. You need that vitality and you need to be able to talk and communicate. That's not about a top down way of seeing the world. Like, let's all subsume or let's like all repress ourselves so that we can make something work. But how do we actually care about each other and ourselves, not becoming a doormat for someone else, but also caring and for each other? And those kinds of conversations are complicated. And now how do we do that so that we're getting enough care for ourselves and working together in harmony and being able to have life stuff happen and handle that in a way that's also about caring for the truth of our experiences instead of, I have to be perfectionist. I have to be a certain way in order to perform and then either kill myself or expect you to kill yourself, or I have to give up everything and then have no accountability and no standards.
Part of what I heard in what you said, right? You really moved very quickly between lots of different types of observations that you made. You made observations about the individual body and its process of healing. You made observations about how society conditions that body. You made observations about how that conditioned body participates in relationships. You made observations about the texture of communication and how that impacts collaboration. You made all of these different interconnected observations. And that's because you know that this problem is deeply nonlinear and it's deeply systemic, right? And it's incredibly complex. And I think that one of the things that we as a people are up against is we've got this really complex problem, really complex, multidimensional puzzle, and we all see it from different angles. And this is the thing I'm the most passionate about, and what Harmonize is really fundamentally trying to do is create a way of seeing this puzzle that you just outlined in a way that makes it a little simpler and in a way that really helps us understand how to start working together on that puzzle. So I'll just lay out a little bit of it here and we can explore, right?
Could you let our audience know what Harmonize to describe?
Yeah,
Harmonize?
so Harmonize is a consulting firm that our tagline is we work to bridge the gap between values, vision, and impact. On a more like heart-centered level, we basically see that there's a lot of people trying to create a new economy and a new way of being on Earth and have lots of beautiful visions for liberation, for justice, for healing, for regeneration, and are all staring down the same puzzle, which is how do we work together to do this? So we meet the question, how do we work together to do this? And we particularly, our inquiry is when a group of people gets together, more than two usually, some group of people gets together and they say there's this big puzzle, systemic puzzle. We kind of have a sense of what part of the puzzle we want to work on. We want to work on reproductive justice. We want to work on ethical land transitions. We want to work on housing rights, right? Whatever it is, they pick something. And now once they've picked it, they're all faced with the same puzzle. What are we going to do and how are we going to organize ourselves to do it? And that pattern we try to meet. And that pattern, basically our framework simply is when you're building an organization or a team or a business or a group or a network or a church or a family, whatever you're building that, whatever it is, you're creating four things basically together. You're creating a way of seeing together, being together, working together, and growing together. This way of seeing together is the way you understand your contexts, your what is causing what in your world, and given that, what is your purpose as a group? That's your way of seeing. So an example of a way of seeing is some people will see through the lens of decolonization. They'll say, I look at my world, I understand myself to be a person on Turtle Island inside of a colonial history, and colonization is the prime cause of the world that I'm in. That's how they understand causality. Naturally, they're going to then connect their purpose. So I'm going to do something that's decolonizing. Like there's a way of seeing together. That's just one example. We all have our different cosmologies or different causal analyses, political analyses. But when you get a group together, you're building a way of seeing together. You're also creating a way of being together. And being is just this human puzzle, right? We have thoughts, we have feelings, we have bodies, we have experiences. We think we know things, but we don't even really know what knowing is. What is going on? This is a mystery. Oh my gosh, humans, right? How do we deal with that together? How do I deal with it as an individual? How do we be together in a relationship? And how do we be and create culture? So there's a way we navigate that. And that's that field of the wiggles you were talking about, right? How do I navigate? I'm at a meeting and I feel the wiggles. What do I do? That's how I'm learning how to be with you.
Okay. Or my kids got sick and yes, I promised you I'd get you the report tonight, but now my kid is sick.
Yeah.
And
how do you be a human?
Which usually that's not allowed. In some places,
well,
it's not allowed.
I would say it a little different, which is that there's a specific way of being that is useful to impose on people at certain times for certain purposes in those contexts, right? It's like there's a way of being that a factory wants its worker to be. There's a way of working. They want the factory worker to work inside of their systems and do all that. But there's also a way of being. They want to see themselves as a cog in a machine, see themselves as a mechanistic, value time in a particular way, right? There's a way of being really in there. And then so we need a way of seeing. We need a way of being together. We need a way of working together, which is like, we need structures, we need roles, we need decision-making processes, we need policies, we need practices of how we facilitate meetings, how we do accountability, right? There's a whole ecosystem of things we need, ways to work together. And then we need to learn how to grow together. Because no matter how we see, be, and work together, there will come a time where we will have to change how we see, be, or work together. We're going to learn that it's not suited to the task at hand. So we're going to have to grow, and we're going to have to be able to listen to the call to change and respond to it in a way that's appropriately participatory and so we're truly responding to this deep call to change. So that's basically what we're doing when we're creating an organization. We're getting a group together to learn how to see, be, work, and grow together and shape that toward a purpose that's aligned with a larger vision. And then that's happening, if we'll go farther, but like then that's happening in this broader context where there's a lot more than just organizations going on. There's also individuals, relationships, there's systems, there's ideologies, there's the world and all the human and non-human inhabitants and the earth itself. There's the realm of spirit and ancestry and archetype and animism. And there's the world of like the ineffable source of mystery. And we're inside this really huge thing, figuring out how do we create alignment to create this vision of that we want to see. And then we also need to learn how to name that vision together and talk about that vision and values together. And Harmonize says, well, let's call that vision harmony. You know, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create harmony across all of those layers I just outlined by seeing, being, working, and growing together in alignment with a deeper set of values. And that deeper set of values we think of as liberty and justice for all. Liberty and justice for all, because we think it's a conceptually strong, and also because in this moment in time, we think there's a really good political strategy behind saying liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, I think a lot of our listeners are right there with you. And then they're like, this problem happened or this challenge happened, and I don't know how to make all of these things harmonize. Give us a success story, Simon. Help us. We need some faith here.
I recently worked with this crew doing like really deep and powerful land transition work. And they were all incredible visionaries, brilliant people with powerful histories in their own rights. And they worked to answer this call, a call that was coming up in terms of doing more of this land transition work. And they started to go toward developing a strategy, and they popped up into a conflict that derailed them for months. They almost broke apart as an organization. And that happens all the time because we're doing work so close to our purpose, so close to our soul, our vision. It's so intimate to who we are trying to be in the world, and so wrapped up in how we're navigating the individual complexity of being here on Earth. And it was tough, you know, they really kind of grinded to a halt.
I so relate. A lot of my clients, it's the same thing. You're saying they've given up a lot. They could be making 3 times more money. They give it up because they want to do work that makes a difference. Yep.
I chatted with them. We had one group conversation. Then they went and did some work themselves. We did one more group conversation. They did another like half day bit of work themselves. And they came back completely repatterned, right? Went from there couldn't function anymore, and were like gears were grinding, a lot of pain, into not having solved all the answers, right? It's not like we just solved land hoarding, but now all of a sudden they understood their problem in a way that allowed them to work toward it. And it really didn't take very much. It just really took me coming in and saying, hey, you all are in a pattern together. The pattern is the relationship between structure and flow. There's a lot of people have trouble with the creative forces of structure and flow. They try to overstructure, they try to overflow, they create structure that doesn't support flow, they create flow that doesn't support structure, they accuse flow of being irresponsible and structure of being oppressive, They don't know how to balance them together. We project all of our past experiences with structure and flow onto one another. We racialize them, gender them, and all of a sudden we're screwed.
You just articulated that so well.
but right, it's not right. But what I said there, we could get caught up in the racialization and the gender and the trauma, or we could just be like, hey, everybody, take a deep breath. Okay? Structure and flow. You know that flow is where we're going. We need to get the energy to move to create division. You know, if you don't have banks of the river, it turns into a swamp. So if you're trying to create something other than the swamp, we need to get the river to flow in a certain way. We need some structure. Let's just talk about what structure is appropriate for this time. Does it support or inhibit flow? We're solving a very basic puzzle together.
But you got them to get out of their maybe fear of the thing based on their idea of it rather than...
It's a different way of looking at the problem.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people, for example, you look at an organization and a lot of people will look at an organization and the primary ways they'll use to understand this thing. Hierarchy, power, accountability. Who can tell me what I can do and who can't, and who's my supervisor, and is that fair? Those are all good questions, right? But they hide sometimes underlying more real dynamics, which is like, let's put it this way. If every time you talked about an accountability system in an organization, the very first thing you did was you gave a critique of hierarchical power and the connection between accountability and coercion. If every time you did it, you would completely miss the point that unless there are systems, structures that create rhythms of predictable interdependence, structures that coordinate us, we cannot create cohesion to act as a group. The issue is we need a structure that helps our individual flow. Structure isn't bad. We just come from a historical experience where most of our structures have inhibited flow. And instead, what we need to do are create structures that allow flow.
I'm totally with you. And what I've seen when I consult in organizations is that everyone thinks they're balanced. I mean, sometimes you have people who think no structure whatsoever. And then you have other people who are like, flow, dangerous, bad. But sometimes what someone thinks is their midpoint, like, oh, this is balance. This is how everything will work. This is a great structure. Someone else is like, what structure? I don't see any structure. There's no structure here. And then you have them both get into a conversation. And I have my ways of handling that. I'm curious how you do. Yeah.
Well, I think structure and flow is the obvious one, but there's a pattern that happens a lot, which we can call like a polarity, right? Which is, it's two opinions or viewpoints or perspectives that look like they're in argument, but they actually need each other, right? So if I show up to a meeting and say, look, I don't want any agendas to the meeting. I just want us to feel into the moment and flow with what's real and respond to the emergence of the moment. Okay, beautiful. Great. There's something valid. Now, if you show up to the same meeting and you say, I need there to be clear agenda items and we have a time for each one and we are moving through and I've got my grid to take notes on. Beautiful, valid. It's a great contribution to creativity. Look at us. We could fight, or we could recognize that actually there's a polarity here. You're trying to bring something. I'm trying to bring something. If we go too far toward what you're trying to bring, we lose the gift of what I'm trying to bring. If we go too far toward what I'm trying to bring, we lose the gift of what you're trying to bring. And if we both recognize that, we figure out the gift that is a new thing that we can create together instead of fighting. And this art of recognizing the polarity and then creating something new is like one of the most important skills to being able to work together, is to be able to notice when somebody else is arguing with you, be like, oh, I need you.
Yes.
I need
healthy
you.
Conflict, which is one of the things that we're trying to do is like have people see the motivating thing underneath, to see the beauty of each other and what we're trying to contribute. Yep, I'm with you. Yeah.
And at every scale, right? On a personal scale, when there's conflicting ideas inside me, how do I do that? When me and you have the argument, when the organization has the argument, when we have public debates inside our movements or between movements, how do we do this and engage, meet each other to find the spark of truth inside of what everyone's saying to light the fire, as opposed to trying to make ours win.
Right. Instead of trying to make the thing that I love what you're saying. This is very aligned with how I work. One of the challenges, and I'm curious how you handle it, is time. Those conversations usually take some time. I try to argue if you put the time in, you save time later. But sometimes, capitalism, the urgency of the day, sometimes you're working with organizations, they're struggling,
Yeah, can you give me let's ground it. Let's create an example to work with here.
Let's create an example.
Or
okay.
Pick an example from your life or something like that.
Let's make up an example because I don't want to take any secret. But wait a minute, what I want you to shine. Give me an example that you think is really ideal for that.
Oh well, I was gonna play with an example and show you how I would think about it. The thing that makes it take a lot of time, 9 times out of 10, is a combination of arrogance and lack of psychological safety. And often those two things meet at the same moment. Because what are the circumstances when you won't actually just take a breath and think about this other person and be like, what are you trying to say? What circumstances really create that? It's really when you think you already know and you're fixated on that and you feel like on an ego level you have something to lose. Or if there's something in the environment that's making it hard for you to access that part of your awareness to learn and grow. That's usually when it takes really long. Otherwise, it's usually pretty fast. It's usually pretty much, and I see this every time I work with an organization, it's always a question. Are we going to get it fast or are we going to struggle this whole way through? And I just got done working with an organization. They went from barely able to have a group conversation to just swung totally around inside of a new structure, thinking about business strategy, creating in very, very quickly. And part of the reason was because they were smart. And part of the reason was because they had a skillful teacher. Hopefully I was decent. But a lot of it was they just didn't defend things that didn't need defending. So I think I went to that place to be like, if you're one of the people who thinks, oh my gosh, it's going to take so much time, then just turn yourself into a person who does it fast for yourself. Just do that. And otherwise, it does take a lot of time. And I'm going to say, when I look at the current state of the United States and how we are or are not successfully organizing toward the world that we want to create, I don't see us moving swiftly in the right direction of building power and making the whole thing happen. I see us glitching out and pausing to make it happen, to do that deeper work. I think is important. And when we slow down, we usually see something that we didn't see when we were moving fast. We avoid that at our own peril.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I'm wondering, because what I'm worried about is that for our listeners, some of this still sounds pretty abstract. And I'm wondering if there's anything that we can do to really ground it and so they can imagine, so they can be over your shoulder when you're in that room. Because I know that's what got me passionate about doing my work, was when I saw someone doing oh yeah, forget about this. They're never going to change. And then right before my eyes, something happens and you're like, oh. And I feel like if more people had that experience, we'd have more hope, maybe more energy for those kinds of conversations. More people would take it upon themselves to seek trainings and seek things to help them move in that direction. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely hear the desire to ground it. And we can talk about specific examples. And I think also just like taking the moment for maybe the two of us to share in our own personal stories and to invite people to reflect in their own lives. The way that you see the world right now, and understand yourself is different than when you were a teenager. Something has changed. There's things you used to believe that you no longer believe. There's deeper insight and deeper wisdom that you have. You know that change is possible because you exist. You've felt it. You've seen it inside yourself. How much of a bummer would it be if you were the same version of yourself that you were when you were a teenager? Great. How much of a bummer would it be if 10 years from now, you're the same version of yourself that you are now? How boring. Like, when you have this itch, we know that whatever we think right now, there's a deeper knowing possible. However we care right now, there's a deeper care. However we love, there's a deeper love. However we see, there's a deeper sight. It's there. And we usually know that finding that change inside ourselves is one of the most meaningful things that we can do in our lives. Think about the moment of rupture and repair you've had with a friend. You fought and then you made up. How sweet it was. Sweeter than if you hadn't fought to begin with. Like, we know. We are all very aware. It's just that, do we choose to lean in everywhere?
Right. There's sometimes we're just like, nope, it's not going to happen there.
I think that it takes a particular orientation, right? If me and you are in an argument and fight, let's say me and you are fighting, I may come to the belief Phoenix will never change. Phoenix will never understand me, whatever. Okay, that may or may not be right. That belief. But regardless of whether or not it's right, when I'm still pointing out at you and saying Phoenix will never change, I'm missing where my agency is. My agency, the invitation of my moment is that I can change. I can grow. I can learn. Because if Phoenix thinks I'm a jerk, there's something about what Phoenix is saying that's important for me to hear. It might only be 1%, right? Maybe it's 99%. Maybe I'm really just a jerk. But like right now, for example, right? Somebody's listening to me. And there is somebody right now who is thinking, what an arrogant white guy to be doing all of these things, right? That's great. And some percentage of them is right. Now, if I totally wrote them off, I'd miss that there's some percentage that's right. But if I can look for the percentage and take that in and actually incorporate it, every conflict I'm in, every single one is fuel for my discovery of myself. Every piece of feedback is just more grist for the mill of me deepening my own prayer. Let's go. Let's do it. Of course, I need to create certain environments of psychological safety and support. And in the world that we are in right now, there needs to be real safety and boundaries, because some people, the reason why they're closed to that deeper reflection and transformation has to do with real needs to protect themselves psychologically and materially from violence, right? It's not like everybody can be like, let's go out into the world and engage conflict for growth. It's like, it's not like that. And a lot of us set the boundary on that way closer than we need to.
Yeah. But I want to talk about those people, because when I was thinking, I was giving myself the feedback of groups I've worked with where, you have some people who are like, listen, it's a struggle. I'm doing this after 2 jobs, and this kind of interaction is something that I'm really not interested in. Or they'll say, I just don't want to talk to the 5th white guy today who has A, B, C, and D to say to me about something. And I want to include them in because I know what you're interested in is social change. And I think that's sometimes the problem, is that people don't include them in some of these conversations because there's an assumption that people have the similar resources, or that if we just believe and just put extra, and not realizing that some people really are on the edge. There's, disability justice. There's people who, and I feel like being able to have a movement personally that allows for people to have different capacities is, to me, central to how we're going to change things.
So just to make sure I'm hearing where you're bringing us, it's like what I'm hearing in your response to what I said was kind of this pointing to this assumption that I was making, right? One can only show up in the way I was describing if one has a certain level of like resource, nervous system resource, and willingness.
I think that's how some people would describe it. I don't know that that's how I was thinking of it.
Cool. Help me understand.
I was just thinking that sometimes there would be resistance to what you're talking about, and that it's valid.
Yeah. I think that the boundaries that a person creates for themselves in terms of what kind of stuff they're willing to deal with and what they're willing to be in relationship with and in intimacy with, those are really valid. Right. And I think what you're pointing to is, right, the person, right, the Black person who says, I'm not going to deal. I have got a total of 15 minutes of white nonsense I deal with every day. Once we've crossed the threshold, I'm not dealing with this white nonsense anymore. That we need to understand that and respect that and attune to that, and not make the mistake of being like, oh, well, the room where the power is has a lot of white nonsense. So if you're going to show up and have influence, you better be ready to deal with white nonsense. It's like, oh, right? The script actually needs to be flipped. The room where the power is actually has a limit of white nonsense. So if you're going to bring any white nonsense in, you can only be here for 15 minutes. Right? The power dynamic has to be flipped in our in our thinking and our attunement. I totally agree with you. And I think that like there's also something that I think is like really humbling and really hard. And me and my business partner, Tamala, wrestle with this all the time. And Tamala is a Black woman from the South. So we kind of have very different backgrounds. But there's just a certain amount of composting that it takes to be in collaboration and co-creation with one another. There's just a certain amount that you're not going to get out of. And it's not peripheral to the work. It kind of is the work. And we really haven't as a people been fair and mindful and just about who's forced to do more and less of that composting, more or less of that being the adult in the room. And we're talking about a time on Earth where it seems as if we're all being called to access the most profound depth of our power and our capacity to create this world of harmony. And that most profound depth includes the ability to be with somebody saying some nonsense. And I think we all get it from different directions. So I think that there's both the attempt to be caring about where it falls, where the nonsense falls and who gets hit, caring about how power works, and also inviting us all to be like, this is kind of what we have to deal with. Like sometimes I joke, it's like basically what I am is a plumber. I'm a cosmic plumber in organizations. And at the end of a lot of days, I smell like shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to have a solo performance act that I did was composting anger. I feel like that's one of the things that's necessary. And I also feel like in the same way that we can have a systemic response to inequity, we can have a systemic response to emotional inequity, where we're not going to need everyone to do that composting work if we can have enough resources that we are using in different ways, because just being inspired by that, we can have a world that's abundant enough that we can hold people where they are and that a system that works has a way of bringing people up through more and more capacities. If we could team up together, we could create systems like that. This might be a good segue to you describing your project because there's elements of that seems to be around creating some kind of systemic way of collaborating.
To me, disability justice movement's got one of the strongest frames to understand this thing that we're talking about, right? Because it's... Yes.
Props to those people, those pioneers, folks.
And I think it's the individual, it's the place where the individual and the social meet each other, right? Because to create a world of access and disability justice, it's not that everyone's expression of agency and power and health is the same, but it's also not that people don't take agency and express power and find their journey toward what their health is, right? It's going to look different. We're going to have different capacities. And the invitation remains that no matter where you are, you can also be on your journey of becoming. And that journey of becoming, I know no one who's become more of who they want to be without kind of going through the like a little conflict with somebody, a little self-reflection, a little seeing their own shadow, a little growing. Like, I don't know. So it's the invitation that we can all be in that. And we can all know that that's happening together. And we're balancing it.
Yeah. What are the things that you're excited about that you're involved with that you would like the Next Economy Now community to know about?
Yeah, so we've been doing this work, Tamil and I, together for 10 years of bridging the gap between values, vision, and impact. So we've done, strategic development, organizational development, conflict transformation, everything down to like hiring and firing policies, everything down to like trauma repair work with individuals, like just anything on this thing. And we're now this summer doing these two big courses. We have a course called Unshakable Organizations. And Unshakable Organizations is about how to build a strong, aligned organization right now in today's political climate. How do we see, how do we be, how do we work, and how do we grow together in order to create this vision of harmony and manifest our deep values of liberty and justice for all? Emphasis on the all, especially in a context where we're seeing a political apparatus that's creating liberty for some and liberty for capital at the expense of liberty and justice for all. That's what's happening, really. So how do we do that? How do we build strategies? How do we develop resilient organizations? And it's really exciting because we're doing cohorts of that. So some people are taking it all together. There's a bunch of people who take it as individuals. But for example, we've got 30 organizations in Sacramento that are all taking the course all together. And then we have a cohort. So now that group will get to build relationships with one another, develop shared frameworks, shared political analyses, shared strategies, and we'll be able to then build from those relationships moving forward. So that's really exciting to me. It's Unshakable Organizations, and that one starts in the beginning of May. And then we also have a course, Conflict Resilience Intensive. So conflict is inside of all of our movements. It's a huge potential energy. It's an energy that has the potential to get us to collapse in and break apart, or to find the new way and birth something new. So our course is on how do you meet that to be able to stay functional with your strategy and to be able to find the deeper potential through individual practices, like how do you balance your nervous system and internal parts work and the drama triangle, like these kinds of internal things. Relationally, how do we talk to each other? And then organizationally, what do you do when conflict has become so large that you need a formal collective response to it? And how do you build that so that we can kind of help groups from reinventing the wheel? We get a whole bunch of people coming to us that are like, we need a conflict policy. And now we're at a space where it's like, here is the one that we've used a whole bunch of times. Customize that. Let us know how it works. And enough people have come back to us and said, it worked well, that now we are teaching it.
Cool. So that's harmonize.work, HARMONIZE.WORK. Oh. We need all of us working together to help people shift and be able to collaborate, to have rich relationships. Yeah, where conflict isn't an ugly word.
Yeah. And I think that like at the fault line of an earthquake, it feels like it's destruction. Stay there long enough, it becomes a mountain. And I think that's a little bit about how conflict works. A pain in a muscle that leads you to do physical therapy results in a stronger body. If you get the therapy, if you do the thing, right? It's not that it's going to be there naturally, and it's going to find its expression of what it wants to be given what it is, right? But you can do, and I think that if all of us, if I had a magic wand and I could do one thing with my magic wand, it would be have everyone get really hungry to see the places where they are out of alignment with their deepest vision for themselves so that they could see it and start to bring themselves back home to how they want to be. And if we were all hungry, if you're hungry for the feedback, conflict isn't scary anymore because you realize it's a feedback-rich environment. And if I have the supports I need to metabolize it, I'm going to come out of this conflict and I'm going to be stronger with more self-knowledge, probably with a deeper relationship with myself and with people I love, and maybe with the person I'm in conflict with, or maybe we will both come to the dignified mutual decision that we don't need to be in relationship. But anybody who's been through a really healthy breakup knows it's great.
That part, one of the things that I love about what you said was about the group of people who help you metabolize it. Because life is different when you have a bunch of people who you can really talk to on a deep level, where you can be vulnerable, where you can share, where you can trust them to say the thing that is true with care because they love you. And you have that. That's a very different quality of life. And one of the things we're dealing with is less friendships, less connection. Loneliness is actually becoming I think it's already been declared a health issue. So, I mean, this is like, there's so much we could talk about. And I think we just scratched a bunch of surfaces.
Well, I want to just bring it back to like that, the level of the puzzle that we're trying to solve. Because there's the individual puzzle, like loneliness. There's the individual puzzle of me navigating myself. Then there's this relationship puzzle, this interpersonal puzzle. How do we actually enter into relationships that meet this need, that allow us to deepen and know and heal and be resilient? Then there's this organizational puzzle. How do we get together in groups to create more of that and to create the world that we want to see? And then there's the systemic level of like, okay, there's also like capitalism and the mental health industry and like all the new age stuff. There's this whole thing moving money. Then there's these ideologies of how we story ourselves and how we're supposed to be. All of that is taking place on Earth with all of the beings in relationship to animism, archetype, ancestry, spirit, and energy, and inside of this holiness, holy sacredness, mystery that we're a part of. And all of those levels are all working together to create what we're talking about. And you say, you clearly, like when you talk, Phoenix, you map those things, you point to them, right? Just being able to be for real with each other, personal, interpersonal, organizational, systemic, ideological, world, all source. That's what we're dealing with here. And we need to figure out how to weave them. And it's appropriate to focus on different ones at different times for different reasons. That's a nice little nugget for us to be able to talk more specifically about it all.
I'll let that be the last word, because otherwise this will go on for another hour.
And that would be fun for us.
For us, yes. Thank you, Simon.
Thanks, Phoenix.
And thank you, all the people listening in. This was the Next Economy Now podcast.
Hey, Next Economy Now listeners. If you enjoyed this conversation and are looking to dive even deeper into the B Corp movement, you'll love our new podcast, Beyond the B, hosted by Lyft Economy's Amy Allison and me, Ryan Honeyman. Beyond the B is your insider's guide to the B Corp movement. You'll learn about the new B Corp standards shaping our community, how the B Corp movement is navigating the various tensions and challenges of growth, and how businesses like Patagonia are putting their commitments to people and planet in practice. Check out our latest episodes and free resources at lifteconomy.com/beyond. You can also subscribe to Beyond the B on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again for listening.